morning, and welcome to Where Spirit Meets Science. Thank you for joining me on this Sunday morning for this next episode of Where Spirit Meets Science. So today, I think I'm going to go back to share a message, inspirational message from my other book titled Spiritual Inheritance, Merging Generations of Divine Wisdom. And I talked about this in an earlier episode in the relationship with my grandfather, the late Reverend A.B. Lauenborg. And you can go back to that episode to kind of get the background and context for this. But in short, my grandfather was an Episcopal minister, and actually that tradition runs deep into my family on my mother's side, to my great uncle and my great great uncle back to the early 1904, and who was the first bishop to Cuba and parts of Mexico and so on. And so anyway, but I just real quickly I discovered his sermons that were all typewritten that I inherited, and hence the name Spiritual Inheritance. But I got these from him and carried them around for years and actually didn't read them. And then I was at a low point in my life one time, and I decided let me read these, because I was more spiritual, and we'll talk about spirituality versus religion. I think it's important to call out what the differences are. And but it's one reason I was hesitant to do it, but that day I was inspired to do it, and I actually pulled one out of the box that he had made. It was in a wooden box he made, and started doing that. So I'm going to share one of those messages today, which is called Go and Do Thou Likewise, or Taking Inspired Action. It's about taking inspired action. But before we get into that, let's do our meditation. So I want you to get situated wherever you're sitting and get comfortable. And we are going to do this for a few minutes to kind of ground ourselves and get centered on the topic. And I'll put some music on and we'll get started. All right? So I want you to start by just settling in, getting comfortable where you're sitting, and take 3 deep cleansing breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. Let's continue to breathe in and breathe out. Continue to breathe in and breathe out. And as you're breathing in and breathing out, you're releasing the worries of the day. You're not thinking about what you need to do. You're being present in the moment. Continue to breathe in and breathe out. Quiet your mind. If you have thoughts, think of them as clouds in the sky just passing by. Continue to breathe in and breathe out. And as you continue to quiet your mind, you feel relaxed. You feel the weight of everything upon you, releasing. And as you're releasing that, you're going to turn your intention within to that stillness within, and prepare yourself to receive wisdom and inspiration. For that wisdom and inspiration already lives inside you. You are just allowing it to come forth. I'm just your guide. So continue to breathe in, breathe out. Feel the energy and the quiet, like waves on a shore washing up and washing back into the sea. You continue to feel that ebb and flow of energy as it moves through you. Let it move through you and guide you to the place within. Breathe in and breathe out. You're feeling lighter as you're sitting in your space, and it starts to release those things that no longer serve. And we're going to focus on and set our intention to taking inspired action. This is what we want to receive from messages today. Don't think about what it is at this moment. Just be open to receive that inspiration. Breathe in and breathe out. You are on the journey. That journey within. Raising your vibrational energy to resonate to that small, still voice within your soul. Continue to breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. When you feel that energy flowing, you'll feel those goosebumps on your skin as it's flowing through you. It actually feels like an energy flowing through you. Let it flow. Don't give it any attention. Stay in the present moment of breathing in and breathing out. In this moment, you are transported to another dimension of yourself. Breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. You are ready. we start to slowly come back into our awareness of where we're sitting. And we are ready to receive messages. And when you're ready, open your eyes. Feel that energy within you, that presence. It's a beautiful energy. Yes, and here we are. Welcome. Thank you for taking that time to do that meditation. So, each of my grandfather's sermons, excuse me, always started with a quote from the Bible, and then his writing, the sermon, his message would come from that, and he would bring it into the present day. These were all done during the 40s to the early 70s, late 60s. What's interesting to me as I, I've read those and continue to read and contemplate his writing through the years, I'm reminded of how powerful his arguments were and teaching messages. And he was such an eloquent writer. And I remember, and he didn't hesitate to say what he thought. He spoke truth. He didn't mince words. He told it like it was. And of course, I remember this more as a boy, and later on when I had an opportunity to live with him for a few months as an adult when he was retired. But I remember as a kid, being at their house. We go visit them in Florida, and they lived in Fort Meade. And he'd do the New York Times crossword puzzle every week. He loved to do little puzzles, like wooden puzzles and all this kind of stuff. He always kept his mind active. He was very committed to educating himself and learning about everything going on in the world. And I remember I used to think sometimes he would get upset, and he was this great Dane, Lauenborg, he was this big man, and his family, our ancestor from Denmark, and he would get very upset, but then he would find his center, calm himself, and bring us back to the present moment. And it's always on your path, it's always a balancing act between this dichotomy that exists within you, where your ego is battling one way and wants you to go in one direction, and your spiritual essence or soul is trying to communicate something differently to you. And you always know it because you feel it in your gut. But my grandfather had this ability to speak truth. He did it with a knowing and a sharpness of wit. It was transparent. Now, transparency is something that seems to have been lost today in terms of wisdom. I mean, I find myself doing that today as well. I look at the news, or I look at the way things are operating today in our industry and that I work in, the naturopathics industry, and I find myself getting very critical, because I see those things that are wrong, and I want to be transparent about it and say that. But many times we don't do that because, especially with ourselves, because we don't want to acknowledge what the truth it is, but our gut's telling us something different. Okay? So this wisdom and this truth, speaking truth, and then taking the inspired action, which is really the message today, is super important to do. And so let's revisit that, and I'll share some of the message from the book and what he wrote, and then kind of synthesize that with today, because one thing that I've learned after reading many of his sermons is that the truth he speaks then is the same spiritual wisdom and truth that applies today. It really doesn't matter. Technology may have advanced, history is different presidents, whatever. It doesn't really matter. The essence of who we are, of these spiritual beings having a human experience, doesn't change. So that's why this wisdom is always timeless, okay? So the main part of this message is about spiritual neutrality, okay? So let me, and moral choices and the importance of decisive action. So let me read the first clip from this of what he had to say about spiritual neutrality. Quote, "Spiritual neutrality finds very little place in the gospel of Jesus Christ. It is one thing or the other. We are with him or we're against him. We are either for the right or the wrong. This necessity of making a choice marks the difference between religion and philosophy. As an intellectual pursuit, we can keep on thinking and speculating indefinitely about philosophical theories, but when it comes to moral and spiritual matters, we must make a decision. An intellectual question is always open, but a moral or spiritual question calls for an answer. The philosopher says, quote, we can never be sure until all the evidence is in, that is, until we know everything. Therefore, our conclusions are always tentative and we keep on thinking and speculating. But if we have a question of right or wrong, we can't wait indefinitely for all the evidence to come in. Action is called for. We must do something about it. The point is reached where we must accept the balance of evidence and make up our minds." End quote. So that's the essence of what he had to say about spiritual neutrality and making choices, moral choices, and decision. And I find what this highlights is the ability to speak truth, okay? And this is what I wanted to kind of impart upon you today, is to have the courage, reflect on these moral and spiritual choices that you have before you in your life, and have the courage to speak truth. Okay? And, I find myself in this dichotomy all the time as the scientist and the spiritual path. I've been doing this for so many years, and I'm like my grandfather in a lot of ways, actually, where I find myself, in fact, we like a lot of the same things or whatever, and I would find myself shifting over to that side of being really critical and seeing the wrong in the world and things that are going on, and I have to bring myself back to balance and trust in the process and have faith and pull myself back. And that's when you let the ego take over the steering wheel of the car, okay, and drive you out off the road there. So you can go down that rabbit hole and spend a lot of time on that, but it's not, in the end, a healthy way to go. So you've got to find that balance. And I'm can have the intellectual, philosophical discussion all day as a scientist and love to do that. But at some point, there has to be a choice made. So, all of us have experienced the displeasure of being placed in or viewing circumstances which begs the statement, quote, this is just not right. How many times have you been in that situation of something in your life or in the world and said, this is not right? So in these situations, a decision has to be made and action must be taken. And maybe it's something that's out of your control that you can't do. But I think from a morally and spiritual place, if it is moral and spiritually wrong, we only know this because of the facts of the situation. But the knowing in our very soul knows that this just doesn't feel right. And you know it with every fiber of your being. So how we respond in our decision is the key, right? This is what we must meditate on and contemplate. It's like, okay, how can I respond in this situation? And like I said, maybe it's a situation you don't have control of, especially something going on in the world that we don't have control of. But we're powerful beings. We have the energy within us and the spiritual currency to shift things. And it's like a ripple effect. If you focus on that intention of something you want to change, and it's like throwing a stone in the pond and watching the waves ripple out and go on, because that's going to impact energetically, because we're all connected energetically. It's going to impact everything. So it is possible to do that. We may want to lash out and fight, but this doesn't serve the greater good of go and do thou likewise, because that's what, in the scripture, that's what Jesus talks about, was go and do likewise, go and do thou likewise. So you want to move forward with compassion and love. If we're stuck in the activity of our mind saying, why is this happening to me, then we're blind to the truth. So we must make a decision. And again, wallowing in despair and grief and agonizing over it only deepens further and brings more of this upon us, because what you think about expands in your life. Okay? And so you have to make a decision. So now, let's think about that for a second. So if we don't, if we take inaction and we do nothing, even if it's a small step or something that we do, it will move us down the path in our spiritual journey. Otherwise, it leads to stagnation in both our personal and spiritual growth. So we explore these concepts of moral and spiritual questions that require decisions. We don't have an intellectual debate about it and continue to philosophically go back and forth. Sometimes we think too much. I have this phrase that I say all the time. It's, human beings are amazing animals. Yeah, we are animals. We have the ability to reason. And the worst thing about human beings is we have the ability to reason, which means we get stuck in this loop and down the rabbit hole of these intellectual debates with ourselves without making a decision. And this energetically doesn't serve our personal and spiritual growth. It's important to move through that. So, an analogy, let me share a story of my grandfather had wrote about, which is a metaphor. But he shares this story. He says, quote, "A man may sit in his armchair and cast upon the arguments pro and con as to whether a certain type of life preserver is capable of holding him up in water. He can estimate the buoyancy of the material, the specific gravity of the water, the effects of wind and temperature. He can find any number of variables which can change radically the complexion of his problem and keep him interested in fresh calculations. But if he is on a sinking ship, the time soon comes when he must stop thinking of that life preserver and put it to use. He must come to a decision." End quote. So, it's a metaphor to our modern day challenges, right? So, I have to ask you and ask yourself this question. What lame situation, person, place, or thing in your life are you endlessly, whiningly, and philosophically contemplating and wasting your time on? You know the answer to that. So, you're the man with the life preserver. Don't contemplate about the life preserver. The ship is sinking. Meaning, the ship of your spiritual and personal growth and the path and journey you're on is sinking because you're in stagnation. Further, what stories are you telling yourself about your life, and how's that working for you? What are you going to do about it? These are questions for you to contemplate. So we all are faced with different situations, difficult ones, but we always know within ourselves, if we take time to pause and reflect and go within, and then usually through meditation, this is a great practice to be able to do this, then by doing that, we end up knowing the answer and what we must do. Okay? So, my grandfather goes on to say, and this is about taking the inspired action, okay? Quote, "The times call for action just as truly in religious matters as in secular matters. We need to make up our minds, reach decisions, and get something done. One of our greatest popular failings is an inordinate love for speech-making. We are forever holding conferences and talking things over. Then we appoint committees and do more talking and report back to a later conference. We have developed an absurd," that's his favorite word today, he says, "faith in the power of language. And somehow it seems to work, though not always in the most healthy way. Let a person state something very positively and very frequently, and a great many people are sure to swallow it whole, even though the statement may be plainly ridiculous. Put a new name on something, and you can easily persuade crowds of people that you have actually produced a new thing. We have largely substituted fate or providence for God, words, floods of words, battles of words, wordy propaganda. In the jargon of the street, we call it ballyhoo. And this is an outdated word, but it kind of captures the essence of what we're talking about here. Okay? So, I see this go on all the time over the years within companies. Companies spend all times in committee and having meetings talking about stuff or whatever, but never make a decision to move forward to do something. They spend time, I call it busy work, just keeping busy, thinking that they're actually doing something. And we do this in our own lives as well. Well, we keep busy, but we're not actually going anywhere. We're drowning in the sea. The ship is sunk and we're drowning. So, it's really important to move beyond these words and discussions and take action. And I would encourage you to do that on these areas of your lives where you've been philosophically contemplating without taking any action. And so how do we get to that? You need to remove the ballyhoo from your thinking in your life. So you know the truth of who you are and see that in everyone else. This is what you must come to in essence. And you do this for your spiritual practice, your meditation, your affirmations, your journaling. All these things will, through thought, sight, smell, hearing music, all these things will guide you on that path. And if you just ask the question within to yourself, the answers to your questions and solutions are not outside of you. This is kind of a key point here. It's two sides of the same coin. One side for me is like the scientist who can intellectually discuss all day, and then there's the spiritual side on the other side of the coin. It's two sides of the same coin, but it's balanced 50-50. You have to bring it to that center and bring it back to the balance. And you do that through your spiritual practice. And then once you do that and you ask those questions, you'll find the solutions. It'll come to you. And then once they do, then you can make a decision and take, that's what I call the inspired action. And sometimes it's usually your first thought that comes to you. And then if you contemplate that and sit on that answer, what happens is you realize it resonates within you vibrationally. As you develop your practice, you'll know right away that, because you physically feel it. That's what I need to do. Now, your ego is going to want to jump in there and say, oh, no, we can't do that. But don't let that take over control and move you back to the other side. Take the inspired action. So, yes, we can manifest many great things in our lives. We have the power and energy to do that. But it takes action as well. You have to take an inspired action at some point. Yes, some things will come into your life and will happen that you didn't plan or didn't actually decide to do, but in essence you kind of did by paving the way or opening the door to receive that. So that is an inspired action as well. So you can only do this properly from the stillness of your heart, where you feel the presence of spirit and receive your inspiration. So as you're working through your spiritual practice, as you're contemplating these difficult situations where you're intellectually and philosophically contemplating, stop yourself and say, okay, stop your car. This is what my wife says to me. Stop your car. And think. Stop the rambling in your head. Let go of that ballyhoo. Okay, and be mindful of your speech and how your words, what you say and do. Because thoughts are energy. They're an energy tone, so you can create unwanted things as well. So really be mindful of your thoughts. And whatever the situation is, you'll certainly find the solution because it already exists within you. You don't have to create it. There's already a path automatically within you. You just have to pull back the curtain to see it and feel it and know it. Okay? So let's close with one last thing my grandfather had to say and close out our message for today. Quote, this religion, parentheses, or spiritual belief of ours must never be simply another something added as a top story to the structure of our life. It is a dynamic spiritual energy designed to reach into the corners of our soul and change the whole complexion of them. So go, says our Lord, and do thou likewise. And that's my message for you. Go and do thou likewise. Do all the things in your life with love, compassion, and gratitude of everything from your heart. For these are the most powerful words in your vocabulary. If you're not living your life this way, then you're out of integrity with your soul, with your spirit, with your path. Thank you for joining me today. Today's message about go and do thou likewise and taking inspired action. So now you can take this with you, go practice, do your meditation, whatever came up for you during this session that is something you're contemplating. Take time to step away from it and go back and work your practice, and you'll have the solution presented to you, I'm sure. We'll speak again next week, next Sunday. This episode will be available on the website, the YouTube channel, and all the various platforms if you want to go back and listen to it later. And I do have in the future some special guests, like-minded individuals that will join me in the future. I'll let you know when that happens. But again, thank you for listening today and joining my broadcast. And for more information, please go visit my website and at williamdavidclark.com. And go and you can subscribe there as well. And certainly you can follow the LinkedIn page. We're live streaming here to LinkedIn right now and Facebook. You can follow those pages and my profiles and stay connected that way. So I wish you a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful week with love and gratitude. I'm Dr. Bill.